You're listening to Speak Up and Stay Alive, Patient Safety Radio, and I am your hostess, Pat Rulo, always ready to share with you the most cutting-edge tips and tools and people to help you have a better and safer healthcare or hospital encounter. And today's guest is one of my all-time favorites. These past few years, I've interviewed over 200 different guests and experts, and every once in a while, after only a few brief sentences, sometimes it just clicks. Well, the other person makes sense and you immediately have a comfortable relationship. And that's how I feel about our guest right now. So let me tell you a bit about him. He is Thomas H. Dahlborg, the Chief Financial Officer and Vice President of Strategy for the National Initiative for Children's Healthcare Quality, called NICHQ for short, where he focuses on improving child health and well-being. Tom brings 23 years of leadership experience to NICHQ and writes some honest and down-to-earth blogs on hospitalimpact.org. He's been on the show before. You might remember him as the good sport who played the first ever Grill the Guest. Well, summer's over, so we've put the grill away, so not to worry. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Hi, Pat. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. Tom, I shared your story a few weeks ago on this program about the woman who stopped buying dog food from Amazon and how that ultimately ended with her insurance company finding out and then concerned that she might get depressed and therefore land in the hospital. They used this information to contact her and offer her a new puppy. Now, I know that I missed or left out some important points because recently I read your blog post titled Patient Engagement, Partnerships, and Puppies, Turning Data into Action, and I found that there's more to the story. So I'd like to start with this story today because it will lead us into finding out what tools are available to engage patients without relying on big data and spies and other kinds of creepy feeling actions. So if you would, please retell that story for all of us.
Absolutely. So this goes back a few weeks. I had the opportunity to host the World Congress Patient Engagement Summit here in Boston. I was chairing a panel, and this really brilliant fellow by the name of Neil Sofian from Premier Blue Cross Blue Shield told this story. And the story that I'm about to share and that you mentioned a moment ago really resonated with me on a number of different levels. What Neil was talking about was how there is so much data out there, and how can we truly innovate patient engagement, working with patients and families, and use the data to do so. And he talked about how you have all your claims data. Through claims data, you can identify when your patients have last come in and what their diagnosis is. And then he talked about big data. He talked about having a relationship with an organization such as Amazon.com, where you can look at purchasing data and what you could garner from that. So I'm going to continue with the story based on that, but then I'm going to circle back and talk about a different, perhaps, at least in my opinion, a better way.
Okay.
What he talked about was, now you have this, an example of a 55-year-old woman, and through the claims data and the electronic health record, you identify her as being moderately overweight, diagnosed with prediabetes and mild depression. And you also notice that she hasn't been in to see the doctor for about 15 months. And so the current state of telemedicine would be, find this data. That means you collect this data, you review this data, and you realize, well, help the patient improve her health care and her overall health. We really need to get her back in to check her glucose levels. And the nurse or whomever it may be calls the patient and says, Mrs. Smith, we noticed that you haven't been in for 15 months. We'd really like to check your hemoglobin A1C, or we'd really like to check your glucose levels. Doctor would really like to see you. Let's schedule an appointment. And you move on from there. And that's the current state. That's what we currently do, and it has impacts. And this fellow, this Neil Sofian from this Congress, talked about, what if we took big data, this data from Amazon.com, and where we saw that this woman had stopped purchasing pet-related supplies through Amazon about 10 months ago. And what if we tried to leverage those additional data points, and we called the patient and said, we have this new initiative through the group practice. We have a relationship with the ASPCA on a local level, and we're looking to have 30 puppies adopted in the next 30 days. Would you be interested? And the point there is, here's this woman that you have all these data points on. You understand that she hasn't been purchasing pet supplies. And one potential innovation may be to really try to connect with her where she is at and really develop a partnership with the ASPCA so that or other patients that maybe have pets or have a love for animals and so forth. You can really connect them and meet with them where they are and make these connections. And in this particular example, help this woman adopt a pet, help this woman with payments for or coupons for pet supplies and pet food and training, and really engage her at this level where you know she has a passion, which the positive benefits would be, well, there's a correlation between owning a pet and positive impact of mild depression. When you own a pet, that may entice you to get exercise by walking the pet, walking the puppy. Now, Pat, when I heard this story, like I said, it really resonated with me on a number of different levels. One is, wow, I can't believe there's an organization out there that's getting data, this big data, and using it in this particular way. And also, is there a better way? I believe we can get these same type of data points, but even better, and also utilize these data points in similar but maybe even better ways. And so let me tell you what I mean by that. When you develop a caring model which allows for a physician or other clinician to truly connect with the patient and to develop a relationship and an authentic connection, and through that you develop trust, and you provide the patient with the opportunity to tell their whole story. When the physician's actually meeting with Mrs. Smith, he may hear or she may hear, yes, doctor, I'm not feeling very well. I'm down today. I just had to put my beloved dog Trixie down after 15 years. Well, there's that same data point that you don't need to rely on big data to obtain, but rather you get it through relationship. And then together you can learn from that and use that information. And so with Mrs. Smith, you might say, well, we actually do have this relationship with the ASPCA. Or, if you don't, we could develop a relationship with the local chapter of the ASPCA. Would you be interested? And really engage the patient in a very authentic way. And quite frankly, when I think about an authentic relationship, you shouldn't be looking for data from a third or fourth party, but rather that authentic connection between the two parties and maybe the family really working together to develop innovative approaches to improving healthcare. And I think we can really develop a care model that and creates the same endpoint, or at least the same journey that we can go on from there, rather than relying on big data.
Yes, I agree with you. When you told me the story, that was the first thing I thought of is, wow, we can extract that same information by asking questions and listening and engaging without going in the back end and accessing it that way. So we talk about the word engagement. We keep hearing the words patient-centered care, patient engagement, patient activation, the patient experience. What does this mean to a patient?
It's a great question. And when I think back to my previous experience with the Hygeia Foundation, which was an organization that really focused on relationship-centered care, it was actually created by 3 nurses. I also think about the Swanson's caring model, which was created by the nursing theorist Kristen Swanson. And she talks about 5 basic processes within developing these types of patient-centered care models. And the first one is knowing the patient, or seeing the world through their eyes. And again, as you just mentioned, when we're actually connecting with the patient and hearing their story and thinking about, that patient, I'm going to take a step back. I hear a lot of times, the patient's non-compliant, they're not taking their medication. Well, wait a minute. Let's take a step back and let's really think about and find out what's really happening in that patient's life. What does their home life look like? That patient that may have been, quote, activated last month doesn't seem to be activated now. What's going on? Did the patient's father become ill, and now they're a caretaker for their father, and they're no longer taking care of themselves? So when you really think about knowing the patient, it's really a 360-degree view as opposed to strictly through that healthcare encounter. Number 2 is being with the patient. That's that part about, I mentioned earlier, building trust and, quite frankly, advocating patient expectations. So really understanding where they're coming from a cultural perspective, from, again, that 360 lens, and really thinking about and being with the patient and trusting and developing mutual trust. Number 3 is doing for the patient. So what they would do for themselves. And it doesn't mean codependency. It doesn't mean replacing the responsibilities they have, but it really talks about help position them, create opportunities to eliminate barriers so they can be at their optimal selves, especially when someone's very, very ill. There's a lot of challenges. And then, of course, it's empowering the patient. And again, as I mentioned, it's not about codependency, but it's really teaching and coaching and explaining and ensuring they're understanding what what the needs are, what the goals are, and that their goals and the clinician's goals are the same, and with theirs being very much a priority. I gave an example of my mother-in-law, which I've written about a number of different times, where she would receive, and she's well in her 70s, almost 80 in fact, and she'd be receiving medications. And I'm not sure, Pat, if you've seen the medications and the little booklet that comes along with it in the font size of 3, perhaps, or maybe even smaller in span.
Exactly. You need a magnifying glass.
That's exactly right. That's not helpful. Let's not waste resources on developing those type of tools. Let's create tools that actually work and are beneficial. Number 5 is maintaining belief. So having faith in and esteem for the patient. And so really a partnership. It's about that. Mm-hmm. So when I read from Health Affairs that the quality of physician-patient interactions in primary care have been declining, and you think about, and then I think about real world, my own experiences, stories that people tell me and I have the opportunity to write about, unfortunately, I see that. And I think it's time that we actually take a step back and understand that innovation does not have to be technology. Technology is sexy. Technology is, quite frankly, easy for expert technology, of course. And yet, when we really think about what's truly beneficial for patients, it's that authentic connection, it's the relationship, it's effective communication, which helps with patient satisfaction, better adherence to medication, lower likelihood of mistakes, and fewer malpractice cases, if we want to say what's in it for the physician and the practice. And it also improves outcomes. It leads to better emotional health and improved symptoms and pain level decreases. And it's so beneficial, and yet we spend less and less time on ensuring effective communication, relationship, and true patient-centered care, and more time on technology, which, again, technology is wonderful. It's a tool. It's a tool to enhance the patient and physician relationship, or the patient and clinician relationship. It's not an end-all, be-all in and of itself.
And this is why I love you. I agree. I mean, technology is wonderful, but technology for technology's sake, when you say, yeah, I got this great app, but nobody uses it, no one knows how to use it. And what you talked about, knowing the patient. And so I think that really the whole concept of the patient-centered care and patient engagement, it's actually quite fluid. I don't think that it ever means the same thing to different patients. And perhaps it doesn't mean the same thing to the same patient, depending on their needs at the time or even their mood. So you might know the patient today, but on Thursday, they might be a different patient just depending on what's going on in their life. So it's a constant conversation, I would think.
That's exactly right. And in fact, there's some pretty neat tools out there about, quote, I'm going to measure patient activation. That changes. Mm-hmm. So for a practice to say, oh yes, I measured 90% of my patients, 50% of them are highly activated, 30% are not, and so on and so forth. Right. It's so fluid, to use your words, and I think you're exactly right. We really need to think about today. Right. How is that patient today? And we really need to think about care models that allow for the clinical team to really understand that patient at each and every encounter, because it does change. Right. And quite frankly, when we don't, things get dangerous. Right. And sometimes it leads to harm. So if I don't understand that patient's going to go home and not take their medication because of the X factor that I never got to hear about because I didn't have a care model that allowed for that connection, that's dangerous. Mm-hmm. And as healthcare leaders, we need to do better than that.
Right. And you are. So tell us about some of your newest tools.
So thank you for asking. So I had the privilege to join the National Quality Forum Patient and Family Engagement Team. And within that forum, we really worked together cross-sector. So we had patient advocates, we had patients, we had hospital administrators, we had Plaintree at the table, we had people who have had significant health crises in their lives and have lost loved ones due to patient safety issues. And we all came together to create a tool. Again, I like the term, a tool, that's all it is. It's just a tool. But a tool that would better position the physician and or nurse or whomever it is on the care team to really understand who the patient is. So within that setting, within the National Quality Forum, we created the Patient Passport. And the Patient Passport is a tool, both an application or a smartphone and also a hard copy, where the patient becomes more than a diagnosis or becomes more than just Mrs. Smith with a diagnosis,
Right.
but a whole person in the sense of it allows for the clinical team to really see the patient as, well, here's the patient's picture. And the picture may be of them skiing. So now if I'm an orthopedic patient and I'm 70 years old and I blow my ACL, and the clinician, the orthopedic surgeon, sees that I'm a skier, well, that's a different goal, perhaps, than someone who maybe the most important thing to them is walking the dog, which is also amazing and a wonderful thing to do. The point is the tool allows for conversation. So the tool combined with a care model that allows for time and relationship and trust so that the clinician can ask the patient, oh, you're a skier. Let's talk about your goals. So are you looking to ski next year? Are you looking to ski again? You know, how often do you ski? What type of skiing do you do? Is it cross country? Is it downhill? And all those types of things. It really allows for a connection at a different level, and with information that leads to wisdom, meaning that a care plan can be co-created between the clinician and the patient to best align with what the patient's goals are. So the rehab program might be totally different, or the rehab provider, the physical therapist, you may find a specialist in someone who's dealing with an ACL associated with skiing, and it's a whole different mindset. So it becomes a way to create connection and relationship, a tool towards it, as opposed to a replacement for it. One of the challenges, quite frankly, that I continue to raise at the National Quality Forum and in that forum, and others were echoing it, was we need to make sure, again, that it's considered a tool, not a replacement for relationship.
Right.
So if folks are interested and they want to go to qualityforum.org, that's the National Quality Forum's website. You can find our tool on there, or you can simply Google Patient Passport National Quality Forum, and you'd find links for it as well.
Okay. Now, through NICHQ, you have a very interesting tool called This Is Me that was specifically used for younger folks.
That's exactly right. Through one of our initiatives, we developed one of our teams, I'm going to say it differently, through one of our initiatives, funded by our funder, and through using our quality improvement approach, one of our teams developed the This Is Me tool, which, as opposed to the Passport, which is multi-pages and includes clinical information and personal information and a lot of wonderful information that can be used and leveraged for that relationship, this is a two-page tool. And the simplicity of it actually is one of its best features. It's really a neat tool which allows for, again, same type of thing. It includes a picture of the patient so you can understand who this patient is when they're at their healthiest, when they're feeling well. It also includes other data points, which, again, how to best communicate with me. What are my biggest challenges? Those types of things. So again, it's a two-page tool, very easy to reference, hard copy as opposed to an application, but it allows for a different type of connection that in many cases, especially when a clinician based on the system or based on the broken system doesn't have time, can look at pretty quickly and really get a different picture of that patient as opposed to simply a diagnosis. And then again, use that information to connect with the patient on at a different level, the patient and family in this case, because this is really was developed within one of our autism projects. And so you'd be able to connect with the patient, the child, and with the family in a different way at a different level. And really, again, with the intention of use it as a tool to create the relationship that better leads to better outcomes by co-creating improvement plans and care pathways.
Well, Tom, where can we find out more about these tools and you?
So I have my own blog, so tdahlborg.wordpress.com. I also, as you mentioned, write for hospitalimpact.org. My email, if people want to reach out to me directly, is tdahlborg@nichq.org. So I will spell my last name just because, number one, I have a Boston accent, and number two, it's not an easy or recognizable last name. So first initial is T, Dahlborg, D-A-H-L, B as in boy, O-R-G. And then you can go to the NICHQ.org website as well and type in This Is Me, and you'll get the This Is Me tool, access to the This Is Me tool. And then I mentioned previously, you go to qualityforum.org, that's where you can find the patient passport information as well.
Excellent. This will all be posted on our website on your page and your interview as well. Is there anything that we're missing that you want to talk about?
You know, there are so many aspects to patient-centered care and patient engagement and so forth. And one of the things I care deeply about, and I think we need to focus on more and more as we're innovating the healthcare system, empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's empathy for our patients. It's empathy for one another. Our ability to understand another's emotions. And what does that do? It can facilitate more accurate diagnoses and better care. And so something we can talk about maybe at another time is empathy. And then I would also add emotional intelligence. Because when we think about, again, innovating healthcare and improving care for all these people we care about, it doesn't have to be technology. Technology is a tool, but there are other means that we can use to truly enhance that relationship, which will improve outcomes.
Wow, you're awesome. Thinking about E, we always talk about, you said E, empathy and emotional intelligence. We always talk about being an E patient, educated, empowered, and engaged. But Tom, I was just thinking as we were talking, you are an E-guest.
Well, thank you very much.
You are easy, enlightening, and eager to share your expertise.
That's wonderful. It's a pleasure to share with you and your audience, and the passion that you have for this subject matter and for patient safety and so forth is just beyond. So I appreciate what you're doing out there.
Well, thank you, and we will definitely have you back on again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat.